Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm sitting with Karin Warnelius-Miller of Garden Creek Vineyards and Winery in Geyserville, California. Welcome, Karin, and tell us about Garden Creek.
Thank you, Allison. It's great to meet you and see you again. Garden Creek, it's a small family estate in the eastern side of Alexander Valley. My husband Justin and I run 100 acres, of which 72 is planted to wine grapes. And my father-in-law bought the property when he was a mere 27 years old. Bare land, plenty of water, and huge potential in 1963. I'm very glad he did so. The soils are dramatically intense. We have 7 different soil types we can quote unquote play with as wine growers and winemakers. So tremendous piece of property. Lucky to live and work here each and every day, I would say.
Yeah. So I know you're celebrating 50 years of grape growing here. Tell me, you started making wine later than that. And of the acreage that you have, what are you growing and what are you producing?
So we have 72 acres planted to wine grapes. We did plant in 1969 our first grapevine and became very serious wine growers at that point at Garden Creek. And that was to Cabernet Sauvignon. We also planted Merlot. So we have 32 acres of Cabernet Sauvignon. We have 12 acres of Merlot, 22 acres of Chardonnay. Those are the 3 larger varietals that we have planted. And then we also added quite immediately thereafter, Petit Verdot, Malbec, and Cabernet Franc. We also, my husband and we have both grown up in wine growing and winemaking, and inspired by our travels around the world and found a lovely, incredible varietal named Schireba from Austria. So we are the second wine grower to have, we have about 600 plants planted to a couple rows down on our lower ranch here in Alexander Valley. And then we recently planted 8 years ago white Rhones. So we have about 4 acres of Grenache Blanc, Marsanne, and Roussanne.
And I know you're selling a lot of fruit. Of the wines you make, what's your total wine production?
Today, our total wine production is 2,000 cases. We began 19 years ago. So my husband and I started our winery together 19 years ago on this property. His father was a wine grower only. And as most growers are out here, you sell your fruit to local wineries, and we continue to do so today. So we sell a good 85% to local wineries that we have very long-term contracts with.
And of the couple thousand cases, where can people find them? Are they direct to consumer or are they in markets?
It's entirely sold to those that visit our winery. We're very intimate in how we approach our sales and sharing our wines. And that is being that we are in love with every piece of it. We have been doing this all of our lives. And to share a bottle of wine is basically your blood and all passion in it. But also, the intimacy of wine is understood by those who grow it and make it. And we are true believers in that. And then we're also very big on relationships. So you have to join our mailing list. We are 100% direct to consumer and direct to those that have joined our mailing list. And then you're able to come visit. And that's when you get your hands on not only tasting our wines, but purchasing our wines.
You got to come in one other way.
On the list for life. There's no getting off.
So you grew up on this property or near this property. I know you were telling me a great story the other day that your mother and your husband's mother were best friends. So it was destiny, even if you didn't know it back when you were children. Yeah. But what is your first memory relevant to wine?
So I'm an immigrant. I came from Sweden in the mid-70s, and Justin's mother is also a Swede. She passed away a couple years ago, but so we became steadfast friends in the 70s in Little Geyserville, as I was explaining. So my family initially lived on Garden Creek for a couple months to get our place here and to understand wine growing. So my dad was essentially apprenticing under Justin's dad, Jim Miller, just for about 5 months. And then back in those days, you could save up for a couple months and put a down payment on a beautiful piece of 20 acres of head pruned, field blended Italian varietals. So that's what my family did. Yeah. And so we had 20 acres we began with. And I I was absolutely a farmer's daughter, and I was the shadow in my father's life. I loved everything he did, but also I was so intrigued by pruning. I would always prune after school, or I would help hoe under the vines in the summer. I loved, and my siblings did. We all had to work after school and in the summer. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I've never done anything else but wine growing and winemaking. So yeah, my first memories are working in the hot sun as a child. And yeah, those were really, really good days. We had to work really hard, but we also had a lot of absolute fun doing it. So
did they ever let you taste wine when you were a kid?
Oh yes, of course. We had, so, Swedes don't grow wine grapes, and wine wasn't really part of our foundation in our culture, but my dad and mother had done a lot of traveling in Europe as in their 20s, and it became part of it because that's what it was. That's what life was here in Sonoma County, and is. And yeah, we would absolutely sit down with wine in the glass and smell it and taste it, and maybe not love it exactly, but you would understand the concept of it. And one really interesting piece is understanding what fermentations are and how you have really sweet juice, and how the conversion of yeast and the beautiful process of turning the sweetness into alcohol and beautiful wine, and understanding how and when things develop and how the depth happens. And I was experiencing that at a very young age. And so we have 2 kids, Justin and I, and we have them also taste wines. They always say, do other parents make their children taste wine? I'm like, I hope so. It's part of life and culture.
Yeah. One day
and understanding the beauty.
One day they'll realize how lucky they are.
Yes, absolutely.
So once you started drinking wine and actually liking it, what do you recall as one of the most memorable wines you drank, and what the occasion was?
So, here, when we grew up, it was a lot of table wine, and but you understood them as being, those were the wines we all had and made. I think one of the moments that was prolific for me in my early 20s, I began working with Jean-Charles Boisset, and he's a negociant, but they have a lot of wineries in Burgundy, and tasting some of his wines from the small villages was astounding. And internationally speaking, it's very interesting when you travel and you start to speak to other vintners and winemakers. There's such a common language, but there are intimacies and greatness behind more beautiful wines. So it was some of the French wines that John Charles's family produced. And
Burgundy,
yeah. And the true inspiration now behind our Chardonnay. There's some amazing, yeah.
So, you've traveled. You were mentioning that you've traveled and tasted wines from abroad. In traveling the world abroad, who do you think drinks the best in terms of quality? Who has the best access or best selections to choose from?
So we have traveled a bit in Europe, and I don't think there's one exactly that I would say. I would say, we were in South Africa, and there are incredible wines in Stellenbosch and Franschhoek and the Robertson Valley, and fine producers, and that's a very old wine culture. And of course, France, you go to Paris, you can get amazing wines on a wine list that's much less expensive than ours. And I think that's the true beauty of exquisite wines, is understanding that you don't really have to pay a lot in monetarily to have a beautiful glass of wine. But Portugal, we've been to, Spain, we've been to, I would say going into the smaller wine regions and going to these smaller producers, you can always find exquisite wines. And Justin and I love finding things that we have no idea what they are. And so I would say the smaller regions and smaller producers.
Well, you're planning Shiraz, so obviously you like the obscure.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we were to go into your wine cellar, not asking how large it is or where exactly you keep it.
Personal wine cellar?
Yeah, your personal wine cellar. What would we find in your personal wine cellar?
Well, I do have international. I'm kind of one of those I wouldn't say I'm OCD, but I love having it organized. I have everything in a spreadsheet and I have it marked. And so what we've got, because we do travel, we always take home wine. So I've got wine. We have international wines. And so in the wine business too, you did a lot of, we call it horse trading, where you have a vintner come over, I'm going to get a bottle of wine of his. And so I have a lot of obviously Sonoma County wines in my cellar, Cabernet Sauvignons. I like to collect Cabernets as well from Napa Valley. As far as who they are, I have the gamut, but one of my all-time favorites, I do also collect. Is my husband listening? No, I love collecting beautiful wines, and I do buy some of the Grand Crus. So I have a Haut-Brion in my cellar. It's a 20-year-old. And I like to collect them for our anniversaries, or, we've been together for 21 years. So I try to collect on those beautiful vintages, but also they're all very big learning experiences. And then so I love collecting wines from all over the world.
So in all the wines around the world that you've drunk and the grapes that you work with, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
I do not, but I do think there are sophisticated varieties. And I think, there's a reason why specific varieties are called noble. Chardonnay, to that example, it's an exquisite wine grape that's planted all over the world. But to understand it intimately is to go deeper into varietal and understand clones. There are, I have Janice Robinson's beautiful wine Bible, I call it. It's the book of wine. And there's also over 1,400 wine varietals in the world. Like, that's exquisite. And there are only those that can be grown in specific areas. They will not flourish anywhere else. That's exquisite. But I think of those that are, to me, it's of interest. It's the dimensionality of wine. It's the sophistication. It's a lot like artwork or music. There are those that inspire you and those that are mediocre, from producer and varietal, in my opinion. So, but yeah, I think it's broad. I'm not going to pinpoint one, because I love wine so much that you have to be very open to discovering new too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What is your opinion on wine critics and scores? We're going to need to say something controversial.
Yes. I love reading about what wine critics write about regions and what they write about wines as far as within articles. And I think, for something as incredibly complicated as wine, it's important for the average consumer. But once you become above and beyond that, you should understand yourself, the value and the intimacy and the depth of wine. For us, we are so small, and also our wines are very indicative of our beliefs and our land, and we don't follow. I think now there's also that place where a lot of critics are, they chase the bigger, huge wines, very tannic, and just because those are very identifiable and robust and muscular and show something that I'm not so interested in. And my husband and I personally don't find it very interesting. And we don't chase scores because we, number one, don't need it to sell our wines. And those times where we have shared our wines with critics, it's interesting because they are, I'm speaking the gamut. I haven't shared our wines a lot with critics, but some understand them and some just completely don't understand our wines because they are more on the old world side, yet with the foundation of the beautiful sunshine, what we have here in Alexander Valley. Mm-hmm. But, it's one of those things I much prefer, the intelligence and depth behind the articles and speaking about the soils and the person and the place and the dynamics of their winemaking skills versus looking at a score, because I think that's one-dimensional as far as judging a wine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so.
Well, especially, looking out at your vineyards right now, and we're not at veraison quite yet, but the berries are there. Yeah. It's green, it's lush, the wind's blowing, the sun's out. To be here, you start to understand a little bit more.
Yeah.
So getting down to you as a wine drinker, red, white, or rosé?
Again, I love them all, but I would say reds. Red. Yeah.
Still or sparkling?
Still. Yeah.
Obviously you make an older world style wine. These are wines that are beautiful with food. I had the pleasure of enjoying them the other night with a beautiful summer fresh garden meal. I'm curious how you approach food and wine pairing. Do you try to find hard and fast rules? Do you think that's the only thing that works? Do you like to experiment? What are you looking for when you're pairing your Chardonnay and your red blend?
I like local ingredients as far as meats and fish and vegetables and fruits. But I would say cheeses, I find for our style of wines, I tend to go international and get aged, old, beautiful cheeses for our wines. But as far as like wine and food pairing at my dinner table, I don't follow the steadfast rules because I truly believe you can eat beautiful grilled salmon as we did with our 2008 Garden Creek Tesserae Cabernet Sauvignon. It was beautiful. Mm-hmm. So therefore, I think, again, you should be open. There's absolute fundamentals behind food and wine pairing. And although when you go to those exquisite restaurants that have it to the absolute beautiful climax, then you're enjoying life, Yeah. So, but to enjoy a beautiful meal in a casual setting, you do have to know, the dynamics of art. For example, our Chardonnay has a lot of, it is a weighty wine. It has beautiful acids. So therefore it's adaptable and can be shared with simple things like lighter cheeses to heavier cheeses, and also, medium weighted meats and like pork versus lighter fish. But it's also, a lot is dependent on your mood sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I would say normally we don't think of Cabernet or a Cab blend with something like salmon, but the Tesserae, which, we have in our glass right here with a couple of years age on it. I think I'm drinking the 2012 right now. It has really soft tannins. And I think that's why I wouldn't necessarily think Cabernet and salmon. And yet, because this is, just the soft tannins say, I can have something a little milder in my palate.
Yeah. Although salmon is a heavier fish, right? And it has weight to it. I don't think it goes personally well with, I think it's nice with a heavier wine. And, no, that definitely was something we discovered we work with a fabulous local chef, and he's always pushing the envelope between our wines and foods. But our wines too, we work very hard on crafting wines of elegance. But they do still have muscular weight, but they're not, I like to explain it as, either you have steroid muscles, right, that are huge and overpowering, or you have those beautiful refined muscles of a cyclist. I think ours are more of a cyclist.
So building upon that, and you may have just answered my question, but for someone who hasn't tasted your wine, what do you think they're missing out on?
Understanding, coming to our property and visiting with Justin and I, we love sharing the stories of old and new. We love sharing the true responsibilities we have to our community in terms of, we speak about sustainability. We speak about our laborers who are our farm workers who have been with us, the Gonzalez family, forever. It's understanding what it is truly to be a farmer in today's world, but also what our impetus behind being so intimate with our wines is to understand fine art is when it's explained to you in detail, is when you actually appreciate it more and also open up to, you're just attracted to it in a greater way. So I am here to share Garden Creek, but also the beauty behind beautiful handcrafted wines and what that truly, truly means. Mm-hmm. So as far as missing out, a quiet afternoon on our property, people arrive here and they just take this beautiful breathe out and they take it in. And so we have a lot of open space, and we walk the land with people, and we touch and feel and explain what the old vines and the new vines are doing. And for us, it's, we like to make new friends. So.
Wine Soundtrack, the voice of American wine growers and makers.
So speaking about vineyards, you grew up in this land. You know the soil. You don't just know the grapes, but you know where the grapes are from. Every vintage tells a different story. Do you feel that vintages tell more variation from year to year or more similarity?
Variation. And the more my husband is one to say he's been the wine grower here for the past 26 years on our property. He took over from his dad when he was 19 years old. And when we started making wine just a couple years later, it's very apparent that you become a much more sophisticated wine grower when you start making your own wine off your own property, especially at the caliber that we're pushing on our wines, meaning we chase the specific soils out in our field. We have the 7 different soils, but of course there's a mishmash between them. And absolutely, every year is absolute reflection of the year. There's an underlying place where it's the Garden Creek soft, elegant tannins and beautiful dynamic fruit and layering of incredible fruit and a long, beautiful finish and just scrumptiousness in your mouth, but also every year are very individual, which is the beauty behind winemaking. So we have a series, right? I don't make the same wine every year. I don't want to. I am crafting a series, which began in 2001 and each individual wine. And then also, it's interesting. You have to accept that the vines are getting older. We are getting older. And that hopefully equates to more wisdom, right?
Wisdom and maturity.
Wisdom and maturity. and you just come to understand where you are and your place and your identity. Although I can say Justin and I have never been afraid of being ourselves and crafting wines that we truly believe in and are a reflection of this place. We are all about purity in our wines. And purity to us means non-manipulation, allowing the wines to show themselves from the source of where they were grown, guided by the hands of the farmer. My husband is an incredible farmer, and he takes nothing will stop him from doing what he needs to do to create beautiful fruit. And he's very well known for that as well, which I'm very proud of. But
so he's the farmer, but you spend time in the vineyards as well.
Yeah.
Are either of you known for talking to your vines?
All the time.
No, what do you say to them?
Yeah. Well, my father-in-law has passed away, so it's interesting. There's a place where it is very spiritual when you understand and walk your land and love your land so much. And we have walked it a lot. My husband's grown up here, and then I know this property from having been here now for 21 years, but also as a little girl, I was here. And you don't exactly talk to them like children but you appreciate the place. And there's nothing greater, I think, in life than to walk your own property and walk in your own dirt and, watch the birds above and just have quietness,
Yeah. So if it was disrupted and space aliens were to land on your property, which of your wines would you want to present to them?
Today, probably the 2012 Tesserae, Garden Creek Tesserae. It's our current vintage, and it's a powerful wine. It speaks place, and I would say it stops you in your tracks. So maybe that's what
So now you were saying that you've always loved farming, and this is something you always wanted to do. Is that what you wanted to be when you were a little girl, and thinking about what you wanted to be when you grew up? What were your plans?
I knew, I am one that I have strong ideals for myself and what a structure of a family is. And I grew up with 3 other siblings and my mom and dad. And unfortunately, they divorced when I was 15, which crushed me. But I loved farming. I loved our property where we grew up on. I sat in on my father's business meetings at the bank or with the lawyer or with the accountant. And I love business and I love how things work. And I love the legal side and the numbers. And also I love marketing. So I'm an entrepreneur in me. I've always sold things. Even when I was like 13, I sold things to my friends or, I've always sold things and it's very natural to me. But also I love wine and I would never stray from it because it's absolutely a part of you that it just becomes a part of you. And no, I knew I wanted to be in the wine business, and I wanted to have my own property, and I knew I had to marry a winemaker or a wine grower. But I also had high expectations where I'm a Swede and an immigrant, and I'm very proud of being Swedish. And I had a 50% minimum on my husband's blood. So my dear husband's 50% Swedish and 50%. But it's also
the best of all worlds.
Yeah, but more so we have an ideology that we believe together, because Europeans think and live and breathe a specific way. And this is how I was brought up, to be very mindful of my environment. And the traditions are incredibly beautiful, but also being an American is pretty amazing as well. So it's the best of both worlds. But I think the identity of being a Swede and being a farmer were two very big pieces for me as a young girl.
That's pretty amazing that all the things you said you wanted, you just checked off and you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I'm a strong believer. If you don't speak it, it's not going to happen. The universe must listen.
So when you're not, it's a huge undertaking. You've got a lot of property here and a lifestyle, but when you're not wandering the vineyards and making wine, what do you do in your free time?
Personally, I love cycling. We have incredible back roads here, so I put on my great music earbuds and take a 15-mile bike ride. We have 2 kids that we absolutely adore, so I am taking them and exploring the world. Our daughter's a horse rider, and I ride too when I have time, so I love that. And my husband and I kite surf, so we go out to the coast a lot. Sonoma County is an amazing, amazing place, so I can bike ride. I can surf in the water, which we also do. We kite surf out in the ocean, go swimming or wakeboarding in Lake Sonoma. There's all kinds of things. We like to be active as much as we can. Get away from the desk as much as possible. But
yes.
Yeah.
And when you're planning a romantic evening for the two of you, what are the wines that you would be, if you ever get that chance?
Yeah. What are the wines?
What would the wines be that make up a romantic evening?
Well, I always like a lovely champagne. Of
course. And it always puts you in the mood.
Yeah, and I prefer brut. Yeah, and I like older, actually, bruts. So I would say that. And then I do love our Chardonnay. Our Chardonnay is exquisite, and it's beautifully and easy to drink. And then as far as a red wine, last night we actually had a dear friend's Cabernet, which was beautiful. So that's what I love about having our own cellar. It's dependent on your mood, but yeah, it's usually something of that nature. I just go into my cellar and grab something, but
open a couple bottles.
Depends on the weeknight too. If it's a weekend or a weeknight, those are two very different.
So I'm sure you've gotten a lot of great advice over the years, but what do you note as one of the best pieces of advice you've ever received?
I think the most important piece is to be yourself and to believe in yourself. And, and also don't be afraid of mistakes. You're not allowed to make mistakes in many ways in our society. But to be a great entrepreneur, you actually fail more than you succeed, and it makes you greater in life. And there's not really a place, in winemaking, you can take certain risks, and the risks give you the greatest rewards. I think that's overall said so in life or business, So I would say that don't be afraid to go to the edge, but you also need to know your own, how far you can go. But I would also say don't put, certain things in jeopardy.
Yes.
So.
And if you could share some advice to our listeners, what would you share other than the great advice that you just received and live your life by?
Yeah. As far as, wines, I would say don't be afraid to try wines that you have never heard of. I think there's so many to be discovered. Also, I think it's really important to, it's interesting in the wine business. It's quite competitive, and to don't be afraid to go to that small family winery that may not be as perfect as those that are fanciful and have 5 different tasting menus to share, but you can find some pretty exquisite, amazing enjoyment in wines that perhaps you haven't discovered or brands you haven't discovered. So that would be my advice on that.
Looking back at your career here at the winery, what would you say is your proudest achievement to date in your work?
I would say that my husband and I have been making wine for so long, and I'm incredibly proud to work alongside my husband. And we recently, a year and a half ago, were acknowledged as one of the top vineyards in Sonoma County for our sustainability initiatives. And I'm very, very proud of that. We started these initiatives as far as sustainability, organic, and that's cover crops and, obviously no chemicals and organic materials only. And thinking of the human side where our workers are housed here and taking care of their happiness. And I'm very proud of what we have achieved, yet it's also been incredibly natural steps for us because we know that we understand the ramifications of your action. There's always a reaction. And so I would have to say I'm very proud to stand next to my husband and share our wines each day, and also for where we have been recognized in our sustainability efforts.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
So complete the sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
A table without flowers.
So, if there was one person in this world that you would love to see drinking your wine, who would that be? From any walk of life.
Dead or alive?
Dead or alive.
Madame Clouquot. Yeah, I read her biography and a few other books. I think she's fascinating. Yeah. She was just an amazing woman and strong in her time. And yeah, I would love to meet her.
I love that. Yeah. So I know you talked about wines that you have for a romantic evening with your husband or just a night at home. I mean, Same thing, right? But if you had to go to a deserted island and only take 3 wines with you, what would they be?
Oh my gosh. I will say I love my wines, and I know if I were to have my last wine, I would want that. So I would take our 2004 Garden Creek Tesserae, which is one of my favorite vintages, 15 years old. And I would absolutely take, like I said, I love sparkling. So will I have ice on my island?
Sure.
Okay. And then I would also take a, probably, I love Gruner Veltliners. If that would be my last 3 bottles right there, that would be it. And a producer, I'm not sure, but something that's very sophisticated and on ice. Yeah. Okay.
Well, so now we'll play a little game with those wines and some of the others you've talked about. Okay. And you tell me what music you'd want to be listening to or what it makes you think of, the kind of mood it puts you in. So let's start. We're sipping the 2016 Chardonnay from here on the property. Mm-hmm. And tell me what I should be listening to as I continue to sip this.
Let's see. What's that new Lady Gaga song with the movie? What's that?
Oh, from Star is Born?
Yes, I would say that with Chardonnay because it's a passionate wine.
Okay. Oh, now I'm going to have that song in my head the rest of the day.
And it's been played so much, but I don't know. I just came up with that, but I think it would work because it's super passionate. It doesn't leave you, and yeah.
Okay.
So let's go with that.
Fantastic. And what about your Tesserae? Let's go to your 2004, your favorite vintage.
Oh, I would say that would probably be perhaps an old Eagles song. Maybe Hotel California. Just sitting back in the sun.
You can check
enjoying
out
a beautiful,
but you can never leave.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I feel. Yeah, and it's old school. It's just the good old days. That's how I feel with our wines. Like, enjoy the moment. Yeah.
And a little Gruner Veltliner?
That would be probably a little bit more. Let's see. That might be, the first time I experienced one was when my dad actually made Gruner Veltliner. He had a winery in Sweden. That's a whole nother conversation, but he made some, and I was 18 then. So I'm trying to think what was a good song back then. Perhaps a good Prince song. 1999 or just because those wines, that's the first time I experienced them when nearly 30 years ago. Yeah. And it was, yeah.
Okay. And last one, your obscure Shrebe.
Shreba. That would have to be, that would be more of because that wine is, it's a bit like a carousel in a way where you're experiencing it's a beautiful wine where, I would say, I'm sorry, I'm going off on that tangent.
It's good, but I can see it as a carousel. It's got,
do you know what I mean?
Like those cool aromatics that kind of come and go, but then it's got a little
on the carousel. Like it's a cool, really interesting voyage,
little salinity, acidity, fruit, it kind of
brightness, color,
depth, warmth. Yeah.
So a carousel song.
Okay. Okay, I won't pressure you with that anymore. I'm going to ask you one more question. I'm sure you have a long list of places you want to travel to, wine region-wise.
Yeah.
What's at the top of your bucket list? Where do you want to go next?
I'd love to go to southern France. We would love to go to the Rhone region. I would like to go back to Austria. But yeah, I think southern France and check out, I would say like southern Rhone would be absolutely amazing, being that we're starting this southern Rhone blend now. Yeah, but I love traveling to all. You know where I'd like to go to is Tasmania. Yeah, there's vineyards there.
Really?
And we've been to New Zealand, but I'd like to go back to the southern island. We were in the north. That was exquisite.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, while you're planning your trips, if we want to plan our trip, can you just remind everyone where they can find your wines both online and in person?
Yes. So you'll easily go to our website at Garden Creek Vineyards, that's plural.com. Joining our mailing list is advisable, and you'll get on our wait list. Otherwise, you can phone us to schedule a tasting, which is 707-433-8345. Or our email is easy to remember. It's wine@gardencreekvineyards.com.
Great.
Yeah.
And just schedule an appointment. Just don't show up, but plan ahead.
No, we do everything privately, and we do taste Wednesday through Saturday, and they do book up rather quickly. So we do advise to call 1 to 2 weeks prior to your visit, at least 2 weeks if you're traveling from afar. And it's $75 a person. We speak and share 2 hours with you and share our older vintages. Yeah.
Well, Karin, thank you so much for joining us today on Wine Soundtrack. And we hope to come visit you again here at Garden Creek. And we'll see you as you travel abroad as well.
Okay. Thank you, Allison.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.